I moved back home at 30 and my parents charged me rent. That's not clickbait, that's my actual life. I didn't find out about the rent part until the day I arrived with my entire adult life in the back of a U-Haul. If you'd asked me 3 months earlier what my 30s would look like, I would have said something like promotion to senior marketing manager, maybe a bigger apartment in the city, fewer IKEA shelves, more houseplants that don't die. Instead, I got corporate restructuring, a cardboard box with my name on it, a severance package, and the email subject no millennial wants to see in her inbox. Lease renewal, rent increase notice. My name is Rachel. I'm 30, American, single, with a liberal arts degree and a moderately overdeveloped sense of responsibility. I did everything we were told to do. Got good grades, went to college, graduated with only moderate student loans, moved to a city, got an entry-level marketing job, climbed the ladder, split rent with roommates in 2 small apartments. And still, 1 round of layoffs and 1 big rent hike later, I was on the phone with my parents saying the sentence I'd sworn I'd never have to say. Can I move back home for a while? They didn't hesitate. Of course, Mum said. You're always welcome here. Dad took the practical follow-up call. We'll figure it out, he said. Come home, get back on your feet. It'll be good to have you around again. In my head, I pictured something soft and nostalgic. Me in my old bedroom, sleeping under familiar ceilings. Mum's cooking, Dad's bad jokes. Evenings on the couch watching trashy TV together while I updated my resume. Like a cozy, extended childhood sleepover with a side of career crisis. I did not, in any version of that fantasy, imagine standing in their kitchen on move-in day while my dad slid a piece of paper across the table and said, as calmly as if he were passing the salt, "So, this is the room rental agreement we came up with." I stared at it. Then I stared at him. "Room rental agreement?" I repeated. "What, like a contract?" "Well, yeah," he said. "Just so we're all clear, it's not a big deal." My mum hovered by the sink, drying a dish that was already dry. "Your father likes things in writing," she said, giving me a tiny, nervous smile. I looked down at the paper. At the top, in 12-point Times New Roman, it said, "Room lease, family agreement." Underneath, tenant, Rachel Miller. Landlords, Thomas and Susan Miller. Monthly rent, $450. Utilities, 1/3 of electricity, water, internet. House rules, see attached. I felt my face get hot. $450, I said. For my own room in my parents' house. Dad frowned slightly. "It's below market rate," he said. "You'd pay double that for a room around here." "I just lost my job," I reminded him. "That's why I'm moving home. I thought this was a get back on your feet situation, not a sign a lease with your parents situation." He folded his hands. "It is a get back on your feet situation," he said. "But you're 30, Rach. You're not a kid. We're not going back to you living here for free while we pay for everything. That wouldn't be respectful to you or to us." Respectful. That word stung, and I couldn't even figure out why. Mum stepped in. "We talked about this," she said softly. "We want you here, truly. But when Ethan moved back for a while after his divorce, it got messy. Money, groceries, chores. Nobody knew what was expected. We all ended up resentful. We don't want that again." She nodded toward the paper. "So this is us trying to do it differently," she said. "Clear from the beginning." I looked at the contract again, at the number, at the words tenant and landlords. I moved back home at 30, I thought, and my parents are literally my landlords. It felt like a punchline. It also felt like a betrayal. But here's something I've learned. Living through a housing crisis as a millennial in America, sometimes the things that feel like betrayal are actually boundaries. And sometimes boundaries feel like love with a clipboard. I wasn't ready to see it that way then. At that moment, all I could think was, this is not what going home is supposed to feel like. I picked up the pen anyway, because I didn't have another option. I needed a place to live. So I signed on the line marked tenant, and my new life as a 30-year-old boomerang kid with a lease in her parents' house officially began.
They hadn't repainted my room. That was my first shock after the lease. My childhood bedroom was frozen somewhere between 16 and 22. Faded pink walls, a bulletin board with old photos and yellowing concert tickets. My high school soccer trophy on the dresser, college pennant above the bed. "Wow," I said, stepping inside, dragging my suitcase behind me. "It's like a time capsule." "We kept meaning to turn it into an office," Mum said from the doorway. "But then we didn't. I guess we were saving it." "For what?" I asked. "For this moment when the economy collapses and your adult daughter moves back in." She smiled sadly. "Maybe," she said. We carried boxes in while Dad fussed with the U-Haul in the driveway. "What am I supposed to do with all my apartment stuff?" I asked, opening boxes of dishes, books, the cheap IKEA desk I'd assembled myself. "The big stuff can go in the basement," Mum said. "For now. Your desk might fit in here if we move the dresser." We played furniture Tetris for an hour until my adult life and my teenage life were crammed uncomfortably into the same 12 by 12 space. My sleek black desk looked ridiculous against the pink wall. My ring light, left over from pandemic-era Zoom presentations, sat next to an old lava lamp. On the bookshelf, my college textbooks leaned against my worn copy of The Babysitter's Club. It felt wrong. Like wearing your old prom dress to a job interview. That night, lying in my childhood bed in my childhood room as a 30-year-old tenant of my parents' house, I scrolled through Instagram and watched a reel of some girl my age buying a fixer-upper house with her husband. Closing day, #homeowners, #adulting. I stared at her granite countertops and her key photo and felt my lungs tighten. Meanwhile, I had a lease with my parents and a pink room. I texted my best friend Maya. "I moved back home and my parents are charging me rent." "Wait, what? Like actual rent? How much?" $450 plus 1/3 utilities plus house rules, Lamau. Kill me. That's a lot. I mean, it's cheaper than my old place, but still. I thought they'd just let me crash for a few months. Boomer parents really said no free lunch. But also, maybe it's their way of not treating you like a child. I stared at that last text. I didn't want to admit she might have a point. I dropped my phone on the comforter and stared at the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. Apparently, we'd never taken those down either. I moved back home at 30, I thought, and somehow I feel both 12 and 80 at the same time. Sleep did not come easily. We had a family meeting about house rules on my second night. If you've never had a family meeting as a fully grown adult woman with a 401k and grey hairs, I don't recommend it. Mum made a pot of tea to keep things calm. Dad came to the table with a yellow legal pad. "Okay," he said, like he was chairing a board meeting. "We thought it would be good to lay this all out so nobody's confused later." I wanted to say, "I am confused already," but I kept my mouth shut. He read from his list. "Rent is due on the 1st of the month," he said. "You can Venmo or write a check. We'll text you your share of utilities when the bills come in." Mum chimed in. "We'll still do most of the grocery shopping," she said. "But if there's specialty stuff you like, oat milk, that fancy yogurt, that should be on you.
And we'd appreciate it if you could cook dinner once or twice a week. Okay, I said slowly. That sounds fair. Noise, Dad continued. We go to bed around 10. No loud music or TV after that. If you're having a friend over, just give us a heads up. If it's a guy, we'd prefer the door. Dad, I cut in. Please don't finish that sentence. I'm 30. He flushed. Right, he said. Old habits. Just respect that this is still our home too. Mum slid in. We won't go into your room without asking, she said. We won't comment on how late you sleep when you don't have work. We won't treat you like you're in high school. She gave me a tentative smile. In return, she added, we ask that you don't treat us like an ATM or a hotel. There it was. The tiny, sharp truth under all the lists. They weren't just being boomer harsh for fun. They had history. With money. With my brother. With me. I thought about the years after college when I'd call home, half joking, half serious. Hey, can you help me with my car insurance this month? Can I stay for free while I'm between apartments? You guys are doing fine, right? You have retirement savings and all that? I hadn't really wanted to know the answer to that last one. Dad sighed. Look, Rach, he said. Our generation was taught, when you're 18, you're out. We left home, we paid our own rent, we scraped by. That's how we learned to be adults. We know things are different now. Housing market's crazy, wages haven't kept up, yada yada. But our instinct is still, if they're under our roof, we're responsible. And being responsible for another adult is heavy, Mum added softly. We did that for 20 plus years already. We're tired. We want to help you, but we also need you to help us. My defensiveness flickered. Housing crisis or not, they weren't wrong. They'd paid for so much of my life already. Braces, doctor visits, a chunk of my college. Now they were on the edge of retirement in a country where retirement was increasingly a maybe instead of a guarantee. But pride is loud. Pride said, yeah, but you didn't have to graduate into 2 recessions and $1,500 rent for a studio. Pride said, you don't get how impossible everything feels. So instead of saying, I understand, I said, fine, whatever. I'll pay the rent and follow the rules. Can we be done with this now? Dad frowned but nodded. Okay, he said. We're on the same page then. We were not on the same page. We weren't even reading the same book. I quickly discovered that job hunting from your childhood bedroom is a special kind of humbling. Every morning, I'd wake up, make coffee, and sit at my too small desk, surrounded by relics of my teen years, trying to sound like a confident professional in cover letters, while a poster of a boy band from 2009 watched me. My LinkedIn said things like, strategic thinker with 8+ years of experience in digital marketing. My environment said, once cried because your crush didn't text you back. Weeks passed. I sent applications into the void. Sometimes I'd get a polite rejection email within 24 hours. More often, I'd get nothing. Any news? Mum would ask when I emerged from my room for lunch. Not yet, I'd say. Did you try that job board your cousin mentioned? She'd suggest. Yep, I'd lie. Job hunting is exhausting even when you have privacy. It's worse when your parents can hear your every Zoom interview through thin walls. Then there was the fridge. One afternoon I came home from the library, my chosen spot for pretending I didn't live with my parents, and opened the refrigerator. My hummus was gone. So was my oat milk, and the fancy leftover Thai food I'd splurged on 2 days earlier. Mum, I called, where's my stuff? She poked her head around the corner, dish towel in hand. "Oh, we finished the hummus last night," she said. "And your dad had the rest of that takeout for lunch. I thought it was up for grabs." "It had my name on it," I said. "Well, yes," she said, "but you know how we share food in this house. I didn't think you'd mind. We're buying most of the groceries anyway." I felt my temper spike. "I do mind," I said. "I mind a lot. I barely spend money on anything fun anymore. If I buy myself one thing I actually want, I expect it to be there when I go looking for it." She blinked. "You could have told us," she said. "You don't have to snap." We went in circles for a few minutes. "If you want your own shelf, just say that. If you want my money, stop eating my food. Don't talk to me like I'm a roommate off Craigslist." Dad came home from work in the middle of it, walked into the kitchen, and backed right out again. That night at dinner, he brought it up. "Look," he said, "if we're doing this whole adult-child moves back home thing, then we all need to adjust. If Rachel wants a shelf in the fridge that's hers, that seems reasonable. If we're paying most of the grocery bill and she's paying rent, that's reasonable too. This doesn't have to be World War III. He said it like it was simple. It wasn't. Every little thing felt loaded. Whose name is on the Wi-Fi bill? Who washes the dishes more? Who takes out the trash? Under each tiny conflict was the same question. Are you treating me like a kid or like an adult? Some days I wanted to slam my door and scream, "Stop policing me, I am a grown woman." Other days I felt like a teenage freeloader again, eating food I didn't pay for while my parents footed the bills. Good times.
The thing about moving back home at 30 is you're not the only one.
Every time I complained to my friends, at least one of them would say, "Okay, but same." My friend group chat, Millennial Meltdown, became a kind of informal support group for adult kids living with parents. There was Josh, 32, back in his parents' basement after a breakup and a layoff. There was Olivia, 29, who'd never moved out in the first place because rent in our city was a joke. There was Maya, who'd done a 6-month back-home stint last year when her lease fell through. One night, after the great hummus fight, I dropped a vent into the chat. Me. I swear to God, my parents think I'm trying to rob them. I pay rent, I help with chores, and they still treat me like I'm 16 sneaking vodka into the basement. Josh. My mum still texts me, "What time will you be home?" when I go out. Home where, Lisa? We share a house. Olivia. Honestly, my parents charge me rent too. They say it's for my own good, and they're secretly saving some of it for me for later. But I don't know if I believe that, lol. Maya. Okay, hot take. Them charging rent might actually be them trying to show you they see you as an adult. Me. Why does being an adult feel like getting punished for being broke? Maya. Because we were sold a lie to BH. She sent a voice message after that because typed words weren't enough. Listen, she said. Your parents grew up in a world where you could pay for college with a summer job and buy a house on one salary. Our world is just not that. So when they look at you, they see adult who should be independent. And when you look at them, you see safety net you were promised. You're both sort of right and sort of wrong. I groaned. I hate when you're wise, I texted back. Maya. I know, but seriously, maybe try telling them what this feels like for you, beyond the hummus. And maybe ask what it feels like for them to be almost retired and still housing a grown child. Not in a guilt way, just info. Information. What a concept. Up until then, most of our conversations at home had been about rules and logistics, not feelings, certainly not theirs. My brain didn't love the idea. Feelings with parents are messy. Feelings about money and housing and generations and failure? Messiest of all. But job applications and doom scrolling weren't exactly making me feel better. So I decided to try something radical. I decided to talk to my parents like they were people.
It started with an apology. Not theirs, mine.
One night after dinner, baked salmon, roasted vegetables, the kind of we're watching our cholesterol meal that makes you realise your parents are ageing, I helped Mum clear the plates, then sat back down at the table. "Can we talk?" I asked. Mum froze mid-reach for the dish soap. Dad looked up from his phone. "That sounds ominous," he said. "It's not," I said quickly. "I mean, maybe a little, but in a good way, hopefully." They sat. I took a breath. "I'm sorry I've been a lot," I said. Grumpy, defensive, acting like you're the villains in a Hallmark movie about the housing crisis. They both looked surprised. "You've had a hard few months," Mum said gently. "We understand." "I know," I said, "but I've also been acting like this situation is something you did to me. Like you woke up one day and thought, how can we make Rachel feel small? Let's charge her rent." I twisted my hands under the table. "So I guess I want to know," I continued, "what it feels like for you. Having me back home at 30, asking for rent, having to make a lease for your own kid." Dad leaned back in his chair, exhaled slowly, and stared at the ceiling for a moment. "Honestly," he said. "Scary." That was not the word I expected. "Scary how?" I asked. "Scary like, we're almost 60, he said. "Retirement is no longer a distant thing. It's a math problem. We've run the numbers and we'll be okay if nothing huge goes wrong. But that house, this mortgage, this electric bill, they're not small. When you were gone and both of us were working full-time, it felt manageable. Now your mum's hours got cut, my company's talking about buyouts, and suddenly we're supporting 3 adults again instead of 2. Mum nodded. "It's not that we resent you," she added quickly. "We don't. We love having you here. I love hearing you move around in the kitchen and knowing you're safe in your room. But every time the utility bill comes in higher or the grocery bill spikes, I feel this panic. Like we're back in our 20s again, scraping by." Dad looked at me. "When we charged you rent," he said, "it wasn't a punishment. It was us saying, we want to help you, but we can't pretend we have unlimited resources. It was us trying to be honest. And yeah, maybe part of it was us wanting you to remember this isn't a permanent solution. You're not a failure for being here. But this can't be the rest of your life either." I stared at them. In my head, I'd made them the enemy. Boomer parents with a toughen up attitude, refusing to understand how hard it was for millennials. In reality, they were 2 aging humans staring down an uncertain future in a country where 1 medical bill can wipe out your savings. "I didn't think about it like that," I said quietly. "I've been so busy being mad about the rent part that I didn't think about what it means for you to have me here." Mum reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "What about you?" she asked. "What does it feel like for you?" I swallowed. "Like I failed," I said. "Like I did everything right. School, job, saving a little. And 1 layoff knocked my life off a table like a cat. Like everyone else my age is somehow buying houses and having children, and I'm back in my pink bedroom with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling." Mum's eyes softened. "Oh, honey," she said. You know most of everyone else is just Instagram smoke and mirrors, right? I know, I said. But it doesn't feel that way at 2 a.m. when I'm scrolling Zillow and LinkedIn at the same time. Dad chuckled sadly. I get it, he said. Our generation says, just work hard and you'll be fine, because that was mostly true for us. Your generation knows there's more luck and timing involved. We're trying to catch up to that reality. It's humbling. We sat there, the three of us, in the same kitchen where we'd fought about curfews and car keys 15 years earlier. Only now the stakes were different. And somehow exactly the same. Maybe, Mum said slowly, we can try to see this as a partnership instead of a rescue mission. We're not saving you. You're not draining us. We're three adults pooling resources for a season. A season, I repeated. Not forever. Lord, no, Dad said. We love you, but we also love not having your laundry in the hallway. We laughed. Something loosened in my chest. The rent still stung. The job hunt still sucked. The pink bedroom was still too small. But for the first time, I didn't feel like I was sneaking around in someone else's house. I felt like a roommate, a daughter, both. After that conversation, the day-to-day stuff got slightly less tense. We put sticky notes on the fridge, one shelf labelled R, one M and D, one shared. We set up a shared Google sheet for bills and expenses, which my dad pretended to hate but secretly loved. I cooked dinner on Tuesdays and Thursdays, trying new recipes I'd never attempted in my tiny apartment kitchen. They complimented my chicken curry even when it was too spicy. I started treating the house like a place I lived, not a hotel. I wiped down the counters without being asked. I took the trash and recycling out when the bins were full. I stopped leaving my shoes in the middle of the hallway, a habit my mother had spent most of my childhood fighting. In return, they stopped asking what time I'd be home. Mum stopped making little comments about job hunting time versus Netflix time. Dad knocked before entering my room, even when the door was half open. He even helped me repaint the pink walls one weekend. What colour do you want? He asked, standing in the paint aisle. Something adult, but not depressing, I said. We settled on a soft grey. As we rolled paint over the pink, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. Goodbye, 16-year-old me with her crush collages and SAT flashcards. Hello, 30-year-old me with her unemployment benefits and LinkedIn premium. Feels bigger in here, Dad said when we were done. It's the illusion of adulthood, I replied. He laughed. Some nights, after they went to bed, I'd sit at my desk and run numbers. Severance left, shrinking. Unemployment, not enough. Savings, a modest cushion, not a mattress. I could survive here for a while, but not forever. I moved back home at 30, I wrote in my journal one night, and my parents charged me rent. Maybe that's not the tragedy I thought it was. Maybe it's the training wheels version of the life I'm going to have to build anyway. Rent, bills, rules, other people's needs. The question shifted from, how dare they charge me rent, to, what am I doing to make sure I'm not still here at 35? Not because being with them was awful, but because I wanted more for myself. For all of us. It happened on a random Wednesday. I was half convinced my resume had been marked "Do Not Hire" somewhere in a secret HR database when I got the email. We'd like to schedule a final interview. The job was with a mid-sized non-profit in the city, doing marketing for community programs. Less money than my last corporate job, but more aligned with the part of me that wanted my work to mean something. I did the Zoom call from the library conference room, wearing my one good blazer. 2 days later, they called. Rachel, we'd love to offer you the position. I muted myself and did a silent scream, then unmuted and said calmly, "That's wonderful to hear. Thank you so much." We negotiated salary, start date, benefits. When I hung up, I sat in the parking lot for a minute, shaking. Then I drove home and burst into the kitchen, waving my phone. "I got a job," I said. Mum dropped the dish she was holding into the sink with a clatter. Dad, who was scrolling the news at the table, jumped up so fast his chair tipped. They hugged me. We cried. We went out for cheap Mexican food to celebrate. As we sat in the booth, salsa and chips between us, Mum asked the question that had been hovering in the air since the words job and offer left my mouth. "So, what are you thinking? About next steps?" She tried to keep her tone neutral. Dad failed. "What she means is," he said, "are you going to start looking for your own place right away, or—" He trailed off. The subtext was loud. "We will miss you. We are ready to have the house back. We want you to fly. We are a little scared of the empty nest again." I poked at the ice in my soda. "I've been running the numbers," I said. "If I move out right away, I can afford a small studio if I keep my lifestyle extremely boring. I'll be paycheck to paycheck with very little going into savings." They both frowned. "However," I continued, "if I stay here, paying rent for, say, 6 more months, I could save a decent cushion. Enough for first and last month's rent, a security deposit, and an emergency fund that's more than $50 in a prayer." Dad nodded slowly. "That sounds smart," he said. Mum looked relieved. "I like the idea of 6 months," she said. "A date. A goal." I hesitated. "There's another option," I said. "I could look into buying. Not now, but maybe in a year or two. If I stay longer, save aggressively. The market's insane, but there are programs for first-time buyers. It'd mean being here for a while, though. Longer than any of us originally planned." They exchanged a look. For half a second, something greedy in me whispered, "You could stay. You could be safe. Childhood home 2.0 forever." Then I thought about my painted grey walls and my future and my parents' quiet longing for a house that didn't have 3 adult toothbrushes in the bathroom. "I don't want to overstay my welcome," I said quickly. "I don't want to become the adult child who never leaves." "You're not overstaying," Mum said. "You're prolonging." "That's not better," I replied. We laughed. Dad took a sip of his beer. "Here's what I think," he said. "Stay 6 months. Pay rent. Save like crazy. At the end of 6 months, we'll sit down, look at the numbers, and decide together what makes sense. No guilt, no drama, just math and feelings." Math and feelings. The 2 pillars of modern adulthood. "Deal," I said. We clinked glasses. For the first time since I'd signed the lease with my parents, the future didn't feel like a blurry mess. It felt like a path. Not perfectly paved, but walkable. The next 6 months were a strange mix of "for now" and "this matters." I took the new job. I commuted from the suburbs on the train, headphones in, watching other people's lives blur by. At work, I threw myself into projects: social media campaigns for after-school programs, newsletters for donors, flyers for volunteer drives. It felt good to use my skills for something besides selling products I didn't care about. At home, our routines solidified. I paid my rent on the first. Sometimes I did it with a little pang of resentment. More often, it felt right, like a contribution. I watched my savings account number go up, slowly. I made a spreadsheet labelled Move Out Fund. On Friday nights, sometimes I stayed home and watched TV with my parents, letting myself sink into the simple comfort of shared laughter. Other nights, I went into the city to see friends. When I came back late, I texted the family group chat just once. Home safe. More for my mum's heart than for any rule. We had our moments, of course. Boomer/millennial clashes didn't disappear just because we'd had one good conversation. We argued about politics. We argued about how often I should visit my grandparents. We argued about whether avocado toast was a scam. But now, under the bickering, there was a sense of team. I wasn't a failed adult squatting in my childhood room. I was a temporarily displaced adult contributing to a household. One night, as I was transferring part of my paycheck to my savings account, I thought, I moved back home at 30. My parents charged me rent, and somehow that's the only reason I can actually leave again without my life falling apart. Irony. Thy name is adulting.
At the end of 6 months, we had another family meeting. No tea this time, just 3 mugs of coffee at the kitchen table. Okay, Dad said, tapping the table with his pen. Let's see where we're at. I opened my laptop and pulled up my spreadsheet. I have enough saved for first and last month's rent, a security deposit, and an emergency fund that could cover 3 months of expenses if I lost my job, I said. Not luxurious, but it's a cushion. Mum smiled. I'm proud of you, she said quietly. Dad nodded. So the question is, he said, do you stay longer and keep building that cushion, or do you strike out on your own again? We looked at each other. We all knew the logical answer. Staying would be financially smart. Leaving would be emotionally necessary. For the record, Mum said, I have loved having you here. The house felt less empty. The grocery bill was higher, but so was the laughter. I swallowed. For the record, I replied, this saved me. I would have been in credit card debt or in some sketchy living situation with 4 random roommates or worse. You caught me. Dad cleared his throat. For the record, he said, I was wrong in some ways. About 18 and out being the gold standard. About thinking if you moved back, it automatically meant you'd failed. It's a different world. It's okay to need help sometimes. That doesn't mean you're weak. He took a breath. But also for the record, he added, I think you're ready. I did too. I found a place, I said, heart pounding. A small 1-bedroom, not fancy, but safe, near a park, on the bus line to work. The rent is a lot, but not impossible. I can afford it now, not comfortably, but sustainably. Mum's eyes glistened. How long have you known? She asked. A couple of weeks, I admitted. I wanted to make sure the numbers worked before I said anything. I signed the lease next Friday. Dad laughed. Look at that, he said. My tenant is moving out. I'll have to find a new one. You're not listing my room on Craigslist, I said. He grinned. We might turn it into a yoga studio, he said. Or a sanctuary where we never pick up anyone else's laundry. We all laughed, blinking back tears. Move-out day came faster than I expected. We boxed up my stuff, again, and loaded it into a rental truck, again. This time, some of the boxes were labelled new apartment, not basement storage. We drove into the city together. They helped carry things up 2 flights of stairs. When we were done, we stood in my tiny new living room, surrounded by stacks of boxes and the promise of a life I'd get to design myself. Dad handed me a small envelope. I opened it. Inside was a check. For emergencies, he said, or furniture, or whatever. I frowned. Where did this come from? I asked. Mum smiled. We didn't need all of your rent, she said.
Not every month. So he put some of it aside. For you. For later. Tears sprang to my eyes. You saved my rent, I said. For me. Part of it, Dad said. We used some for bills. We're not saints. But we wanted you to have a little extra boost when you left. Think of it as interest on the emotional labour of living with your parents. I laughed through the tears. I don't know what to say, I whispered. Say you'll invite us over for dinner when you get a table, Mum said. Deal, I replied. They hugged me goodbye. Not a dramatic, sobbing goodbye, just tight, solid, we'll see you next week hugs. When the door closed behind them, the apartment felt very quiet. My own place, my own bills, no family meetings, no fridge labels, just me. I sat on the floor, leaned against a box, and looked around. For a second, panic surged. What if I can't do this? What if I lose this job too? What if I end up back in the pink room again at 35? Then something else slid in beside the fear. Gratitude. I moved back home at 30, and my parents charged me rent. At first, it felt like an insult, like a verdict on my failure. Now, sitting in a small apartment I could only afford because of those 6 months of paying them and saving with them, it felt like something else entirely. It felt like love with boundaries, support with structure, a bridge instead of a cage. I took out my phone and opened the family group chat. Me. Officially in the new place. Thank you for everything. Couldn't have done this without you. Dinner at mine soon. I'll even let you raid my fridge. A few seconds later, Mum replied. Mum, we're proud of you. Always. And we'll bring the wine. Dad chimed in. Dad. Remember, rent is due on the 1st. At the end of 6 months, we had another family meeting. No tea this time, just 3 mugs of coffee at the kitchen table. Okay, Dad said, tapping the table with his pen. Let's see where we're at. I opened my laptop and pulled up my spreadsheet. I have enough saved for first and last month's rent, a security deposit, and an emergency fund that could cover 3 months of expenses if I lost my job, I said. Not luxurious, but it's a cushion. Mum smiled. I'm proud of you, she said quietly. Dad nodded. So the question is, he said, do you stay longer and keep building that cushion, or do you strike out on your own again? We looked at each other. We all knew the logical answer. Staying would be financially smart. Leaving would be emotionally necessary. For the record, Mum said, I have loved having you here. The house felt less empty. The grocery bill was higher, but so was the laughter. I swallowed. For the record, I replied, this saved me. I would have been in credit card debt or in some sketchy living situation with 4 random roommates or worse. You caught me. Dad cleared his throat. For the record, he said, I was wrong, in some ways. About 18 and out being the gold standard. About thinking if you moved back, it automatically meant you'd failed. It's a different world. It's okay to need help sometimes. That doesn't mean you're weak. He took a breath. But also for the record, he added, I think you're ready. I did too. I found a place, I said, heart pounding. A small 1-bedroom, not fancy, but safe, near a park, on the bus line to work. The rent is a lot, but not impossible. I can afford it now, not comfortably, but sustainably. Mum's eyes glistened. How long have you known? She asked. A couple of weeks, I admitted. I wanted to make sure the numbers worked before I said anything. I signed the lease next Friday. Dad laughed. Look at that, he said. My tenant is moving out. I'll have to find a new one. You're not listing my room on Craigslist, I said. He grinned. We might turn it into a yoga studio, he said. Or a sanctuary where we never pick up anyone else's laundry. We all laughed, blinking back tears. Move-out day came faster than I expected. We boxed up my stuff, again, and loaded it into a rental truck, again. This time, some of the boxes were labelled New Apartment, not Basement Storage. We drove into the city together. They helped carry things up 2 flights of stairs. When we were done, we stood in my tiny new living room, surrounded by stacks of boxes and the promise of a life I'd get to design myself. Dad handed me a small envelope. I opened it. Inside was a check. For emergencies, he said. Or furniture, or whatever. I frowned. Where did this come from? I asked. Mum smiled. We didn't need all of your rent, she said. Not every month. So we put some of it aside. For you. For later. Tears sprang to my eyes. You saved my rent, I said. For me. Part of it, Dad said. We used some for bills. We're not saints. But we wanted you to have a little extra boost when you left. Think of it as interest on the emotional labour of living with your parents. I laughed through the tears. I don't know what to say, I whispered. Say you'll invite us over for dinner when you get a table, Mum said. Deal, I replied. They hugged me goodbye. Not a dramatic, sobbing goodbye, just tight, solid, we'll see you next week hugs. When the door closed behind them, the apartment felt very quiet. My own place, my own bills, no family meetings, no fridge labels, just me. I sat on the floor, leaned against a box, and looked around. For a second, panic surged. What if I can't do this? What if I lose this job too? What if I end up back in the pink room again at 35? Then something else slid in beside the fear. Gratitude. I moved back home at 30, and my parents charged me rent. At first, it felt like an insult, like a verdict on my failure. Now, sitting in a small apartment I could only afford because of those 6 months of paying them and saving with them, it felt like something else entirely. It felt like love with boundaries, support with structure, a bridge instead of a cage. I took out my phone and opened the family group chat. Me. Officially in the new place. Thank you for everything. Couldn't have done this without you. Dinner at mine soon. I'll even let you raid my fridge. A few seconds later, Mum replied. Mum, we're proud of you, always, and we'll bring the wine. Dad chimed in. Dad, remember, rent is due on the 1st. I rolled my eyes and laughed. Then I got up, opened a box labelled kitchen, and started unpacking. My house, my rent, my rules. And somewhere in a quiet cul-de-sac, my parents sat at their kitchen table in a house that was finally just theirs again. With a spare room they'd never fully turn into an office. Just in case, someday, life happened again. Not because they believed I would fail, but because they finally understood, and I did too, that sometimes in this messy American life, with its housing crisis and layoffs and student loans, coming home in your 30s doesn't mean you're going backwards. Sometimes it just means you're taking the long way forward. For a little while. Together.